Ethan Miller was born in a small town in California. Raised in a modest middle-class family where his father worked long hours as a mechanic and his mother managed a small grocery store. From a very young age, Ethan realized that money was not just paper or numbers in a bank account, but the invisible force that shaped opportunities, created security, and often decided whether dreams would stay dreams or become reality. He watched his parents struggle every month to pay the bills, to keep food on the table, to make sure he and his younger sister had clothes and books for school. And deep inside, he promised himself that he would one day escape this cycle of financial stress and build a life where money worked for him instead of him working endlessly for money. When he turned 18, he left his hometown for college with only a scholarship and a small amount of savings for part-time jobs. During those years, he studied economics, not only as a subject, but as a survival tool, spending hours in the library reading about investment strategies, the psychology of money, the history of financial markets, and the rise of technology companies that started in garages and turned into multi-billion-dollar empires. He understood that knowledge was leverage, and the only way to compete with people who had more capital than him was to outlearn and outthink them. After graduating, Ethan found himself with less than $1,000 in his account, but an ocean of ambition. While most of his friends rushed into corporate jobs hoping for stable salaries, he decided to take a different route, freelancing online to generate some cash flow and, at the same time, studying the stock market and the emerging crypto space. His first investments were tiny, a few shares of technology companies he admired, a little bit of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And even though the profits were small at first, what mattered most to Ethan was the proof that he could make money without trading his time directly. This idea excited him more than anything because it was the first taste of financial freedom. However, the road was far from easy. He made mistakes, bought into hype coins that crashed, lost part of his savings on risky trades. But instead of quitting like many beginners, he treated every mistake as tuition paid to the school of investing, keeping a journal of his decisions, analyzing charts, studying fundamentals, and slowly becoming a more disciplined investor. During the day, he worked on freelance projects in web development and digital marketing. At night, he immersed himself in financial analysis. By living frugally, he managed to save and reinvest almost everything. His portfolio grew from a few $100s to several thousand, and with that growth came confidence. Yet Ethan understood that investing alone would not be enough to achieve the kind of wealth he dreamed of. He needed to create, to build a scalable business that could generate cash flow and give him control over his destiny. So he started experimenting with e-commerce, building small online stores using drop shipping, running ads on social media, learning the hard way about customer psychology, ad targeting, and conversion optimization. The first store failed, the second brought in a little revenue, but collapsed under high refund rates, and the third finally gave him his first taste of success, a niche product that resonated with people, allowing him to generate a few $1,000s in profit. That money went straight back into his investments, multiplying his growth. But Ethan was not satisfied. He wanted to build something bigger, something that would not just sell products but solve problems. So he brainstormed ideas and realized that the biggest challenge many young people faced was financial literacy itself. Remembering his own struggles, he decided to create digital content where he could teach what he had learned, starting a YouTube channel where he explained in simple language the basics of investing, budgeting, and entrepreneurship. At first, only a few dozen people watched, but Ethan stayed consistent, posting every week, improving his delivery, using engaging visuals, sharing not just theory, but his real-life journey, including both wins and losses. Slowly, his audience grew. Hundreds turned into thousands, thousands into tens of thousands. And eventually, his channel started earning ad revenue, sponsorships, and affiliate income. For the first time, Ethan experienced what it felt like to earn money while sleeping, waking up in the morning to see his PayPal account growing, and that moment shifted his mindset forever. Passive income was no longer an abstract concept. It was his reality. From that point onward, his strategy became clear. Continue to invest, continue to build, continue to teach, scaling each stream of income until financial freedom was not just a dream, but an inevitable outcome. As Ethan Miller's YouTube channel continued to grow, he realized that the true power of the internet was not just in consuming content, but in creating it. Every video he uploaded became a digital asset, a seed planted in the fertile soil of the global web, capable of reaching people across continents and generating income long after the work was done. His subscriber count grew steadily, and with it his influence. Brands began to approach him for collaborations. Fintech startups wanted him to review their apps, investment platforms offered affiliate partnerships, and suddenly Ethan found himself not just as an investor, but as an educator and influencer in the financial space. Yet he stayed grounded, remembering the nights when he was broke and the times when no one believed in him. He invested the new income streams into diversifying his portfolio, adding real estate crowdfunding, index funds, dividend stocks, and safer crypto projects into the mix. His discipline remained unshaken. Every dollar earned had a purpose. Every expenditure was intentional, and his savings rate was higher than 70%. While his peers spent their new salaries on cars, gadgets, and vacations, Ethan was quietly accumulating assets, turning cash into cash flow, and building the foundation of financial freedom. The more he learned, the more he taught, creating courses, writing ebooks, offering consulting for beginners who wanted to start their journey. And each of these became another stream of revenue. His philosophy was simple. Multiple streams of income create resilience, because if one dries up, another can sustain you. As his income grew, Ethan decided to take a calculated risk by launching his own startup, a financial education platform designed to help young adults understand money through gamified lessons and interactive tools. The project started small, coded by Ethan himself in his apartment, fueled by coffee and endless nights of work, but soon it gained traction. People loved the simplicity and relatability. Within a year, thousands of users signed up, and angel investors began to take notice. Ethan pitched his vision in front of venture capitalists, his hands trembling but his voice strong, explaining that financial literacy was not just a luxury, but a necessity, that billions of people worldwide lack the knowledge to manage their money, and that his platform could bridge that gap. The investors were impressed. He secured funding, hired a small team, and scaled the product, transforming his idea into a company. This was the moment when Ethan truly felt the shift from hustler to entrepreneur. He was no longer just trading his skills or time, but building something that could live beyond him, something that could change lives. Yet even with success, he faced challenges. The startup world was brutal. Competitors emerged. Markets shifted. Regulations tightened. And every victory was followed by new battles. But Ethan thrived in this chaos, adapting, learning, and leading. His story spread online. Major financial blogs wrote about him. Interviews followed. Podcasts invited him to share his journey. And soon he became a recognized voice in the world of personal finance and entrepreneurship. Despite all the attention, he stayed committed to his principles. Discipline, patience, and long-term vision. His portfolio reached 6 figures, then 7. His startup grew. His YouTube channel passed 1 million subscribers, and yet he still remembered the nights when he studied charts alone, when he failed in e-commerce, when he doubted himself, because those failures were the foundation of his resilience. He told his audience that the path to financial freedom was not a straight line, but a series of cycles. Learning, failing, adapting, and growing. And people respected him for that honesty. As years passed, Ethan's influence grew internationally. His content was translated into multiple languages. His courses were used in universities. His startup expanded into new markets. And he became a role model for millions of young people who wanted to escape the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. He often reminded them that financial freedom was not just about numbers, but about choices, the ability to choose how to spend your time, where to live, what to create, and who to help. And that message resonated deeply. Investors continued to support him. Partnerships flourished. And Ethan reached a point where his passive income exceeded the lifetime earnings of many professionals. Yet he never flaunted his wealth. Instead, he reinvested into education, philanthropy, and innovation, proving that true wealth was not measured by luxury, but by impact. And thus his journey from a broke student with less than $1,000 to a global financial educator and entrepreneur became a beacon of possibility, a living example that in the modern world of technology, discipline, and creativity, anyone willing to learn and persist could transform their financial destiny. As Ethan Miller's journey advanced into new horizons, his life transformed from being the story of a young man hustling for survival into a global narrative of influence, wealth, and impact. His startup that once began in the cramped corner of his apartment was now operating from modern offices with a dedicated international team. Investors from Silicon Valley to Singapore wanted a piece of his vision. And his YouTube channel had become a global classroom with millions of subscribers learning about financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and investment strategies in multiple languages. Ethan realized that he was no longer just building his own financial freedom, but he was shaping a movement, a shift in how young people thought about money, discipline, and opportunity. He frequently traveled to conferences around the world, speaking in New York, London, Dubai, Tokyo, and Berlin, sharing stages with billionaires, educators, and policymakers, always carrying the same core message: that financial freedom is not reserved for the privileged, that anyone with access to knowledge and the internet could build wealth. His humility made him different from many other financial influencers because he did not hide his failures. He spoke about the coins he bought that collapsed, the businesses that didn't work, the marketing campaigns that burned money, and the sleepless nights where he doubted if he was on the right path. And audiences trusted him for that honesty. His story inspired governments to consider adding financial literacy to education systems. NGOs partnered with his platform to reach underprivileged youth, and major financial institutions sought his insights into the behavior of the new generation of investors. Meanwhile, Ethan kept building. He expanded his portfolio to include real estate in multiple countries, equity in promising startups, and sustainable projects focused on clean energy and technology, diversifying not just for wealth, but for impact, because he wanted his money to build a better world, not just a bigger bank account. By this time, Ethan's net worth had crossed tens of millions. Yet he lived simply, focusing on freedom rather than luxury, preferring investments over liabilities, experiences over possessions. His daily routine remained grounded: reading, creating content, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and continuously learning. One of his boldest moves came when he launched a venture capital fund dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. Remembering how difficult it was for him to be taken seriously at the beginning, he wanted to break barriers for others. And soon his fund backed dozens of startups that later turned into successful companies, multiplying both his wealth and his impact. His YouTube videos now reach classrooms in Africa, Asia, and South America. His platform had millions of users worldwide, and his name became synonymous with financial education. He was invited to speak at the World Economic Forum, where he emphasized that the future of wealth creation lay not in extraction, but in creation, not in consuming resources, but in creating value through technology, knowledge, and innovation. Ethan's message resonated so much that even traditional bankers and investors had to acknowledge the cultural shift he represented. He continued to remind people that true wealth was not a Lamborghini parked outside, but the ability to spend your time with purpose, to help your family, to contribute to society, and to live without financial fear. And this philosophy became the backbone of his brand. Unlike many who flaunted riches on social media, Ethan became the symbol of quiet power, of intelligent wealth, of disciplined freedom. But behind the spotlight, he also faced personal struggles. Balancing global responsibilities with personal life was difficult. He dealt with burnout, criticism, and the constant pressure of expectations. Yet each time he stumbled, he remembered the promise he made to himself as a boy in California watching his parents struggle. The promise to build not just money but meaning, and that promise fueled him through every challenge. His story was now taught in universities as a case study. Books were written about him, documentaries filmed, and yet he never allowed fame to distract him from his mission, which was to democratize financial knowledge, to empower the young dreamers sitting in small towns with big ambitions, just like he once was. And as his influence spread, Ethan realized that his journey was proof of a universal truth. In the age of technology, resilience, and vision, one person with little money but massive determination could change not only his own destiny, but also the financial future of millions across the world. As the years passed, and Ethan Miller's ventures matured. His net worth soared beyond hundreds of millions into the rare air of billionaire status. But what truly defined him was not the number of zeros in his bank account, but the clarity of his mission. He had built multiple companies, invested in dozens of successful startups, owned properties across continents, and managed a portfolio diversified across stocks, bonds, real estate, cryptocurrencies, and alternative assets. Yet he still told people that money itself was not the destination. Freedom and impact were. For Ethan, the true measure of wealth was the ability to wake up each morning and decide what to do with his time. And his time was increasingly dedicated to building a legacy that would outlive him. His global education platform had expanded to more than 50 countries, serving millions of students with free and affordable financial literacy tools. Governments partnered with his foundation to reform education. NGOs used his materials to teach rural communities, and universities studied his model as a new approach to democratizing knowledge. Meanwhile, his venture capital fund had grown into a global powerhouse, backing not just profitable companies, but meaningful ones, clean energy startups, AI-driven healthcare, climate tech, and education technologies, multiplying both his impact and his influence. Yet Ethan remained approachable, still producing YouTube videos where he sat casually in front of a camera, explaining investment strategies, life lessons, and the philosophy of wealth. His audience now spanned generations, from teenagers learning to save to retirees exploring new opportunities, and every message carried his core values: discipline, patience, and purpose. As his wealth grew, Ethan also turned to philanthropy, establishing the Miller Foundation with a focus on education, entrepreneurship, and sustainability, donating hundreds of millions to causes aligned with his vision, building schools, funding research, and empowering communities. Unlike many billionaires who use philanthropy for image, Ethan's approach was transparent and hands-on, often visiting projects himself, sitting with students, listening to entrepreneurs, understanding problems before writing checks. This authenticity amplified his influence, inspiring others in his circle of wealth to rethink their responsibilities. He often said that money was like energy. It flowed, it multiplied when used well, and it stagnated when hoarded, and he wanted his money to be energy for progress. His philosophy of wealth began to reshape public discourse, shifting conversations from consumption and luxury toward freedom, education, and impact. He was featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at the United Nations, quoted by world leaders, and praised by thought leaders. Yet he never stopped learning. Every day he read, listened, and studied, believing that humility in learning was the only way to stay relevant. As his companies reached unicorn valuations and his net worth soared past multiple billions, he began to reflect more deeply on legacy, what story he would leave behind, what example he would set for future generations. And he decided that his ultimate legacy would not be the companies or the money, but the millions of lives transformed by knowledge. He wanted a world where no child grew up financially illiterate, where no family was destroyed by money stress, where every young dreamer had the tools to turn ambition into reality. And so he invested more aggressively into open source education, creating platforms where anyone, anywhere, could learn about money for free. He believed that true power was not keeping secrets, but sharing knowledge. His openness created a ripple effect. Other educators, entrepreneurs, and investors joined his mission, building a global movement. By his 40s, Ethan Miller was not just a billionaire entrepreneur, but a symbol of possibility, proof that a boy from a small town with less than $1,000 could become a global force for change. Yet he remained the same Ethan at his core, the one who remembered his parents' struggles, the one who remembered the nights of doubt, the one who wrote in his journal after every failure. And that memory kept him grounded. When asked about his success, he often smiled and said it wasn't about being smarter, it was about being consistent, about never giving up when others quit, about learning when others complained, about investing when others consumed, and above all about believing when no one else did. His life had come full circle, from scarcity to abundance, from struggle to freedom, and his story became a blueprint for millions worldwide who wanted to follow in his footsteps. But Ethan always reminded them to write their own story. Because true freedom was not in copying another, but in building your own path with discipline, patience, and vision. As Ethan Miller moved into the later chapters of his journey, surrounded by global recognition and unimaginable wealth, he began to ask himself deeper questions that money alone could never answer. He had crossed every financial milestone that once seemed impossible, from building companies worth billions to owning real estate across continents, from leading a global education platform to funding groundbreaking technologies. Yet the true challenge now was not creating wealth, but creating balance. The world saw him as a symbol of financial freedom. But Ethan understood that true freedom also meant emotional freedom, spiritual peace, and meaningful relationships. So he shifted his focus inward, spending more time with his parents who had supported him through the hardest years, ensuring they lived their later lives in comfort without ever worrying about bills again. He reconnected with old friends, built new bonds with entrepreneurs who shared his values, and eventually started a family of his own, teaching his children the same principles that guided his life: discipline, patience, humility, and generosity. He told them stories about the nights he studied charts in a small apartment, about the failed businesses that taught him more than the successful ones, about the power of persistence when the world doubted you. And he wanted them to understand that wealth was not an inheritance to be consumed, but a responsibility to be carried forward. As his family grew, Ethan also grew spiritually, practicing mindfulness, meditation, and gratitude, realizing that joy was found not in luxury, but in presence, in the simple moments of laughter at the dinner table, in the quiet mornings reading a book, in the long walks where he planned a future not for himself, but for generations to come. He continued to lead his companies, but delegated more, empowering young leaders to rise, giving them the same opportunities he once fought for. His role evolved from operator to mentor, from builder to guide, and this shift gave him space to reflect on legacy at a deeper level. He established scholarships for underprivileged students, funded incubators for young entrepreneurs, built hospitals in rural areas, and created climate initiatives to preserve the planet his children would inherit. Every decision now was guided by a single question: how will this serve the future? His wealth had reached a scale where he could buy anything, yet he chose to build, to educate, to heal, to protect, because he understood that money without purpose was emptiness, but money with purpose was power. As he aged, Ethan became more philosophical, speaking less about returns and markets and more about values and meaning. His speeches resonated not only with entrepreneurs, but with ordinary people, because they were not about numbers, but about life. He told audiences that wealth was not the number in your account, but the strength of your character, the clarity of your mind, the love of your family, and the impact you leave behind. He became a bridge between the financial world and the human world, showing that success and compassion were not opposites, but allies. His children grew up not in the shadow of his wealth, but in the light of his wisdom, carrying forward his vision. And his companies thrived under the leadership of those he mentored, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem of growth and impact. Eventually, Ethan spent more time writing, capturing his philosophy in books that became bestsellers, blending personal stories with lessons on money, life, and purpose. These books reached millions and continued his mission even beyond his direct voice. In his 60s, Ethan stepped back from public life, spending more time with his family in a quiet coastal town. But the world still felt his presence through the foundations, companies, and ideas he had set in motion. And when asked what his greatest achievement was, he smiled and said it was not the billions earned or the companies built, but the lives transformed, the young people who escaped poverty, the families who found security, the communities that discovered hope. His story became not just a biography, but a legacy, a testament that wealth, when built with patience, discipline, and vision, could change the world. And as Ethan looked toward the horizon of his later years, he felt no fear, because he knew he had lived fully, built wisely, loved deeply, and left behind not just money but meaning. And that was the true essence of financial freedom.